And good evening, friends. It is 4:43, and got a few things to talk about tonight while we rock and roll on some animation work. So, anyway, for those of you who come around or watch this later or whatever, welcome. Hopefully, we'll have a grand time. First thing on the agenda on the Discord last week, Sifter shared a link to this website, so I wanted to draw your attention to it. I don't know how to say this, SetiDreams.net, but if you're looking for a resource for anime production materials that are, from real shows, this site is a treasure trove. Storyboards, for example, you got this pretty good list of shows, and if you pop that open, it brings up the gallery, and then of course you can click on this and see. So I mean, if you really want to see what the real stuff looks like, this is a wonderful resource. Now I will say that at many times during the day the performance of the site isn't the greatest, so it's a little pokey. So for me, I'm cheating a bit by using wget to actually scrape the site, and it's taking a long time. It's been scraping since early yesterday, and it's kind of funny. I started using HT-Track, which is like a GUI based website mirroring tool, and it did a pretty good job but had some issues. But when I started using wget on the command line, I was able to, it seems to be doing a good job. The main thing I'm interested in is every single one of these galleries, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them, can be downloaded as a RAR file. So you can download an archive that has all of the full-size images in it. So basically that's why I'm scraping it, so I can make a local copy of the of all the images, and then I'll probably use some PHP code on my web server to actually automatically generate my own galleries, very much like what the format of the site is. I'll probably just kind of roll my own. But anyway, I just thought I'd draw your attention to that, because it's just an amazing resource. It really is, and it's impressive what they've done here. And what you can pick from, SetiEye, if I'm saying it right, basically that's color models, or character models. Those are your model sheets. And then color designs is kind of the same thing, but breaking down what the color model is for characters. Art books is really just a list of books of art surrounding various shows. Storyboards, that's pretty obviously straightforward. And then production sketches, which you can explore yourself. There aren't actually that many of those. So what is this? Golden Time. Yeah, so you can kind of see. Pretty cool. I think it's a great site. Very impressive. So anyway, there's that. What else have we got? Okay, so the question for me this week, I haven't talked a lot about it here. It's been basically an experiment I've been doing personally to jump back to Tahoma 2D and just really be, hey Darren, just really be observant about how I feel about the workflow and the process of Tahoma versus Krita. I've really been favoring Krita for the most part on episode 3 of Salt and Light, and I've done, actually what brought me back to Tahoma was this shot right here of Luca when I did this, and this was done in Tahoma, so I'll go ahead and play the shot. It came out fine. Um, when I originally conceived the shot, I really thought Luca was going to be moving a lot more than he was, and this can tend to happen where what you sort of map out in terms of motion, once you get the acting in there and the pacing and throw it into the edit of the show, it turns out things really didn't need to move as much as you thought they did, right? And that happened here. So that's neither here nor there with regards to the software. But I will say that I, as of today, I'm kind of back in the same place I was before. And but I wanted to kind of explain why, because obviously there's very little that you can do in Krita or Tahoma. Well, let me strike that. There's almost nothing you can do in Krita that you cannot also do in Tahoma. Oftentimes more procedurally, oftentimes more flexibly. And in this shot, the only thing I did that was kind of using the unique tools to Tahoma would be his eyebrows. I did use the plastic tool, as I recall, to animate his eyebrows. But I mean, obviously, if the eyebrows were on a separate layer, that's nothing you couldn't do with Liquify in Krita. So anyway, so I did that shot, and then I kept plunking along. And then this is the shot I'm working on right now. So this shot was done completely in Tahoma, and that is what we see here. So some of the stuff that I typically do in Krita that I needed to be able to reproduce here in Tahoma was basically the effects. So the body highlight effect, that's kind of unique to Tahoma, although you can reproduce it pretty easily in Krita as well. A little bit of curves on the color. And then what I did here, just so you guys understand, for those who might find it confusing, is that all of the levels in the scene are going ultimately to the output, which is what renders. But what I do with a situation like this is use the over. It's just alpha over, foreground over background, so that you can take the background image and have it go directly to the output, whereas all of these levels are going through these effects. And the reason for that is that all of these levels are part of the character. Her shadows, her I don't know what they are, just looking at them, her mouth, blah, 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 blah. So what's the upshot in terms of how I feel about the workflow right now? The timing's no different. It takes about the same time to do to do shots in Krita versus do them in Tahoma. It's 6 and 1/2 dozen the other. What I find is everything's a lot of fun at the pencil test stage, right? It's basically equally fluid and fun and useful, or whatever you want to say, in both programs. Where I'm kind of feeling a difference is when you get to ink and paint. And let's be honest, with a cartoon like this, ink and paint really is a lot of the work. And you would think that things like procedural color and using palettes and stuff, where you can change the colors after the fact and that sort of thing, like here. In fact, I did that in this case. I had made a change to her skin tone, in post. So that's kind of an attractive feature. The main thing that is a little problematic for me is I find I really like a step-by-step procedure where the shot that emerges is unencumbered, steadily evolving toward what the final shot's going to be. I don't know if that makes perfect sense. So the big difference that's jumping out for me in just the grunt work of the minutes and the hours you spend in the program, the biggest thing that I'm really feeling tonight is that when I do ink and paint in Tahoma, what you see here is it's totally normal, okay? A lot of artifacting. it can absolutely be argued that these are things you're not going to see in the final show, and you don't. Because if you look at this at actual screen size, and especially once you get the background over top of it, those artifacts do disappear for the most part. But I do find that I have to, through a fairly lengthy part of the production process, I have to kind of suspend my disbelief and work with a program that's feeling, it feels forced. The other thing is, of course, the liquefy tool. So you're just flowing with the work, and you're doing the ink and paint, and you're going along, and then you realize, let's say, you sort of get to a point like here where, as hard, I'm not the greatest artist in the world. I'm always trying to improve, and so you get in a little transition like this, and it looks fine, especially if you're zoomed in like this and you're working kind of tight. And you go back and you get to the end of the line, and then you realize that this is a little winky. Like, this hair needs to come out here. This is a little bit of a sharp corner here. Things like that, where it's like so stupidly easy to fix that in Krita with the liquefy tool. So it really does turn out, for me right now, that probably the liquefy tool and cleaner, the three things would be the liquefy tool, cleaner, fill operations, that I feel like it just does a better job where I don't have to constantly look at crap like that. Sometimes you do, but I'm just being as transparent as I can about what I'm feeling in the workflow process, right? And then the third thing would be basically effects. If you're doing, to dial in the imagery exactly the way you want, as I said, it cannot be stated strongly enough that everything you want to do, you can do in Tahoma. It's very, very capable. However, when I'm doing it, I just really like the fact that I can take a layer like this and just slap it over top of it, and it instantly looks the way it's going to look. It just feels like I'm engaging with the imagery in real time, more accurate to what I'm going to get. So I don't know. I just, I gave it a couple shots. And interestingly, this came up at the beginning of episode 3 too, because one of the earlier shots of Vesper I did in Tahoma. And the same thing happened then, where I did it and then I jumped back over to Krita, and I'm like, man, I'm just enjoying doing the work in Krita, and I think it looks a little bit better, a little bit controlled. Yeah, the fill depth. Well, and I will say that for the balance here is this. If you're doing some kind of animation where any kind of object hierarchy or keyframe animation is important, then you're going to have better results in Tahoma or OpenTunes, for sure. Krita can do it, particularly with the transform mask tool, but it's a little clunky. And here's the other thing about that. When you're working in Krita and you use a transform mask, which means you're applying, I'll just show an example here, so for anybody that might not know what I'm talking about. If I add a transform mask to this layer, okay, I now have the ability to create an animated keyframe of this character. So the way I typically do it is I add a keyframe here, but then any other keyframes I add in the timeline, not the animation curves. Okay, so let's just say, for our purposes, just to make it simple, I'm just going to move her across the screen. So now Krita does what it used to not be able to do, which is, actually have keyframe animation. Okay. When I'm working in Krita, what I tend to find is that you want to, once you've done something like that, you want to bake it in. Like, you want to merge the group or flatten the layer so that all that animation winds up baked into it, which is one of the reasons why, if I'm going to use a transform mask, I tend to do it last. I want to get all the imagery correct and then do the transformation animation as kind of a final step. But I like being close to the metal, as it were. I like well, it's just like scraping this website. You could find there's a lot of tools out there that are graphical user interface tools for mirroring a website. But I find it's just like when I do video conversions, I use FFmpeg. I am really comfortable with code, and I'm comfortable working with things kind of at the molecular level instead of always having to have it be at the high level. And high level tools always are seductive. They are always seductive because they make much of what's impressive easy, but they also tend to fall apart once you get beyond the stuff that's easy, that requires you to think a little bit more. You start to see the cracks in the tools and whatnot. So that's not a criticism of Tahoma. I mean, I love the program and I use it all the time, but I just found it kind of interesting. Here's another thing, by the way. In this case, what I did was, what if you got in the same position where you're using Tahoma and you really, really need the liquefy tool? This came up in this shot because I wanted to, if you look closely, her hair has been kind of fixed here. Actually, I need to make a little mod here as well. This is actually not quite right. So this type of thing, which you can do on a whole group of layers in Krita, you don't have to do it on a single layer. So if you've got a bunch of keyframed layers, you can sort of operate on them all at once. So just so you know. But you can see that I rounded out the top of her head. I mean, this is just more accurate to the character. That would have been, to do that in Tahoma, I would have had to basically completely redo the ink and paint. So if you get in the horrifying position of getting the whole shot done and colored and you're so focused on each step of the process, and then you realize, hey Ross, and then you realize that something you did upstream was wrong. Okay, this is probably the big thing, and it's kind of ironic because when you think about the difference between Krita and Tahoma, you think of Tahoma as being a more procedural tool where the choices you make do sort of propagate downstream and you can make changes upstream. The problem is that the one area where it isn't good at that is the one that actually comes up the most often, which is what we see here, where, call me an idiot, but, I get the whole thing done, and then I realize, oh, geez, I really kind of messed up her hair. How I managed to do this, I don't know, guys. I don't know. It's like I'm moving fast, and I'm anchored into one process at a time, like maybe doing all the fill operations, and then it's just me. So it's common that I'll get way downstream and then realize, oh, geez, I really need to fix that. And the thing that you have to fix more often than anything else is actually just massaging the shapes. And that's where Krita is phenomenal and Tahoma sucks to high heaven. I mean, it's basically useless. The closest you can come, unless you're going to try to do something magical with the plastic tool, the closest you can come in Tahoma would be to try to make an intelligent selection like this, and then hit control so you can adjust these nodes individually, and then you can kind of do it. You can kind of get the result. It would be, I tell you the truth, if they really wanted to make Tahoma without having to completely recode something like the plastic tool, the simple thing that would get Tahoma close enough to where it basically doesn't matter would be if these nodes that are on the sides of the selection tool could actually, by hitting control, could actually bend out and actually cause the cage to have a corner. God, maybe it's possible. I've never tried it. You hit control and you can do this, but that would be phenomenal if you could get those. If you could get it to break at these corners, almost anything you could do with the liquefy tool, you could do with this. But it's just not there in the program at this point. So anyway, I just wanted to say, again, I'm not criticizing. I might as well hit undo. Okay, so the question then becomes, well, what if you get in that position and you got to go backwards? Notably, all I had to do was just render the image sequence for this shot without the background in it. And then I was able to import it into Krita and then delete all the duplicate keyframes. The entire process of taking a Tahoma shot and backporting it to Krita took literally 5 minutes. Hey, Maria. Literally 5 minutes. It was just like go, 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 done. Okay. If there was one other thing I would say would be a big win for Tahoma in terms of functionality to bring it and Krita closer together, it would be nice if we could hit Control R and be able to just cut this image to the clipboard. The closest you can come really is to take a screenshot of it, like alt print screen. So you can get back to Krita this way if you have to. So then you hit Control V and then you hit Alt M in my case, which is a hotkey for the color to alpha filter, and that allows you to I'm not doing the greatest job of it here, but and it might be because of the, let me try that again. You could also use the magic wand. Obviously you could use the similar color selection tool. You could go boom boom, that would work. So it's still, if you need to jump back, it really only takes a minute to get back. And obviously you can save a render out to file, and you can save it out to a file and drag and drop it into your Krita drawing. So anyway, that's kind of all I wanted to say about it. In this case, I felt like to get the shot to where it needed to be, I needed to jump back to Krita so I could use Liquify over here. And it is obviously quite wonderful and useful that at any point in time we can hit Control A, Control C, cut a shot to the clipboard, and actually paste it directly into Tahoma. So probably most of you guys here already knew that, but that's certainly a super useful thing to be able to do. Okay, so let me look at my... Okay, one thing I wanted to say about Krita, it came up... Okay, so I've got a client who wants to update the slideshow on his website. Okay, and one of the things he wanted to do was include his logo in the slides. Okay, so you got this. I'm not going to pull up a bunch of files right now and show this. I think I can explain it and you guys will understand what's going on. I'll do it in a different file though, so it's kind of clear. So the idea would be this. We've got a photo, typically of something, probably some happy people that are happy with the customer's product, and then the client wants his logo overlaid somewhere in the slides. So what occurred to me is that it would be nice to have a essentially procedural way to do this. Okay, so I figured I would point out what my solution to that would be for those who are interested. One thing people may not be aware of is that you can take an image. Let me see what I've got here. Actually, this would be a great... I'll pull in this image. This is an image from another client. And be aware that you can do what's called inserting as a file layer. Okay? So that inserted... This is actually a good example of what I was talking about. Because this client... Okay, so layer type cannot use the transform tool. Okay, so here's the deal. If you drag an image into Krita as a file layer, you can't edit it. You can't paint it. In other words, the file layer, the integrity of that image on disk is what matters. So if you need to scale this now, step one is you've got to use a transform mask. So you add a transform mask, No big deal. You can go ahead and resize it. Okay, not a problem. Um, if you look at the properties of the image that you dragged into Krita, here the significant thing about this is later you could change the image that's on disk, and when you reload the Krita file, it will update. Okay, so it's just referencing the image on disk. If you look at the properties, this was the key thing that I wanted to find out. According to the Krita documentation, the images that are dragged into a Krita file as a file layer are stored with relative paths. Okay, now that's a really good thing, because in this case, what we just saw there for a half a second is a full path. But here's the thing you want to do. If you're going to try to do something like this, the concept is that you're saying, okay, if I stored the Krita file in the same folder with the slides, and the slides are named like 01, 02, 03.jpg, just like an image sequence, right? Okay, then you've kind of created a little component where if you simply replaced the images with images for a completely different client, you could load up the Krita file, re-render the slides, and now you just created a very nice procedural methodology for creating a bunch of slideshows, as many images as you want. And, you just keyframe the, well, I have to correct myself here. With file layers, you may not be able to actually put in keyframes and switch the image from frame to frame. So that's something to consider. But the point is, if the file layers are stored as relative paths, then you could set up the structure of a slideshow, and then just by changing the underlying images, it would just automatically update, and you just need to re-render it. I will say, though, you might have to render it one frame at a time if you don't have a way to create or turn file layers into animated keyframes, which I suspect you don't. Let me see. Control insert. Yeah, it's not going to let me do keyframe. And so that's a bit of a gotcha. Honest truth, realizing what I just realized, that little weakness right there, tells me that if I was going to set up a procedural slideshow methodology like this, I would not do it in Krita. I would do it in Blender, because then Blender could reference the images on disk and also create an animated sequence of them. I mention it because it comes up a lot with website development. It's really common to have to create a slideshow, and usually there's a sort of a common structure to each of the slides. Like they each are going to have some background picture, they might have a logo, or in this case you got a slogan, and you have these elements that come up over and over. So it's just one of those motion graphics types of jobs that comes up again and again. So I kind of regret talking about file layers, but for those of you that want to use Krita, at least be aware that there is a way to drag an image into a Krita file that can be used as part of a complex image with many layers, and anything that's a file layer, you can modify it later on disk and it'll just update when you reload it. So kind of useful from time to time. So hopefully I didn't lose too many people on that. So you can reference an image sequence. That I don't see. That's where, Tom, I think we actually in real time here just bumped into the weakness. When you're dealing with a file layer, I do not believe that you can reference an image sequence. I don't think you can. You can just reference single images. See, this is actually good exercise in that you sort of explore the possibilities and then discover, like I said, right here in real time, what the gotchas are. And that's kind of what I was saying about Tahoma and Krita, is when a lot of times the features that look so cool, once you really start to use them and go beyond just kicking the tires, you find out that it's not all wonderful, So in this case, with with a file layer as a way to, so my concept was, if you think about it, on your disk, you would have maybe 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, 0, 5. Like you'd have maybe 10 images that are a slideshow, right? And then you'd have a single image that's also a file layer that would be the company's logo. And that in the Krita file would be animated to adjust the logo to put it wherever it looks best in the particular slide. And then you just render the image sequence and it spits out all the finished slides. Well, the problem we just realized is that the file layers each are going to be in their own individual layer. They're not going to be in a single layer that can be an animated image sequence where the image changes every frame, which would allow you to render them out that way. There are workarounds for that, though, frankly, but not workarounds that are amenable to what I'm trying to do, because you would have to put each of the file layers in its own group with its own instance of the logo, which could be, you could clone it, right? And I think you can even do a clone layer. I have to check that, but so that you've actually got the copy of the single image in multiple groups. The idea here would be that you could then ostensibly replace both the logo and the backgrounds in the folder, and when you reload Krita, you would have all the slides for a different client, and then you just make a few adjustments and re-render. But as I say, I think we ran into a hiccup with that workflow, and so there it is. Okay. So like how you do compositing, you overwrite an image sequence and then the composite shows the updates. Let me think about what you're saying there. In Tahoma, there are image sequences well, that's right. What I'm actually describing in terms of a procedural workflow does make sense in Tahoma. You would just have an image sequence here that's referencing specific images on file or on disk. You would have the logo in a separate level, which you would probably animate to change its position for each slide. And then, ostensibly, if you were to replace all the backgrounds on your disk, then the next time you load the Tahoma file, it would do the same thing I'm describing. So yes, and that's right. And then typically with a slideshow, that's what I'm doing, is I'm rendering it out like you've got there, name.001 blah blah blah. And then of course that's what JavaScript uses to generate the slideshow. So interesting stuff. It's definitely something that comes up a lot when you're dealing with web development, where you are trying to work fast. You're trying to get the job done well for the customer without always reinventing the wheel. On balance, I would say this. The fact that when you bring imagery into Krita, typically you don't use file layers, you just import them or whatever. That gives you a local copy of the imagery in that Krita file. I would say in all the experience I've had working on this cartoon, that is almost always a good thing. If you depend on the reuse of assets in different scenes, like you can do in Tahoma, that are all being referenced on disk, more than once I've wound up losing work because something changed, or the ordering, or it's just easier to step on your own toes. So anytime you're dealing with files and paths and referencing, dereferencing stuff, you want to really be a little bit cautious about, make sure you're doing what you intended to do. Right, file layers make, exactly. Somebody does the background. Typical workflow would be this, something like this, where if I wanted to, now this background is actually cut and pasted from another Krita scene where this background consisted of like 6 layers. Okay, so in this case, because I was going to blow it up, I just pasted it in. So this becomes a new local copy of that background. But in a group workflow, you're completely right. You know, your your background painter guy says, "Yeah, I got that background. It's in progress. We're going to have it for you here shortly. But right now, here's what you've got. Yeah, there's a moon and there's some clouds. Okay, and he gives you this. Well, it might be useful to be able to drag this into your Krita file so you can move forward and have a sense of how the characters are going to interact over the background. And when you reload your project the next day, because he's been doing his work, wango bango, now you've got a finished painting, right? So that's definitely a common application. Files exactly the same as if you use the load option. Yeah, exactly. Load versus import, correct. Yep. And you know, I will say this: people who are not, I don't want to sound disparaging, people that are not quite as astute or educated about how computers really work. Like here's the quintessential example that I used to run into, like with employees back in the day, is people have a tendency to create something in an application, you know, like Krita, or document using Word, for example, and they hit File Save and they give it a name and they literally have no idea where it actually got saved. That's like completely common. And as long as they're always only accessing that from within the application they created it, and to take it maybe a step further, if they never get in a situation where the open recent list is getting too long and the file they need is no longer on the list, those people all of a sudden are struggling because they have no idea where they've saved stuff. And you would be, probably you guys that are here would be surprised to know how common of a problem that actually is. And yeah, okay, and Darren, exactly. You know, Darren's a developer, so he's a programmatically knowledgeable guy, you know, who understands how computers really work and the importance of knowing where the heck you saved your stuff. As you guys know, of course, for me with a project like Salt and Light, it's so massive that it's essential that I know exactly what my file structure is, and I always know where I'm saving things. And there's a fairly stringent naming convention, like for naming folders and naming files, so that if I need to get back to something, I can look in Vegas when the prefix to the file name can be seen in Vegas on the clip. So when I'm looking at the Vegas timeline, I've got a little box in the corner here that in the one I'm looking at right now, it says 03-15 period. And then the other numbers refer to the image sequence, right? So I can look at that and I know that if I need to get back to this, it's going to be in Salt and Light / scenes / episodes 3 / 03-15 / and in that folder is where I'm going to find the assets for this shot. So I always recommend to people to work that way. You know, I think if you're just, as I've said before, kicking the tires of a program and just trying to experiment to find out what you can do, you're probably not going to be that meticulous. But, you know, I guess that's the difference between doing a fairly large and complex project versus not. And obviously Tom here is a developer as well, so he knows what we're talking about. Yes, the browse room. Yes, I would say so. If people manage at the project folder level, that's a good start. Yep, totally agree. Totally agree. Okay, so let me look at my notes. Okay, yeah, so the only other thing I was going to talk a little bit about before I get into the work today, which is I really need to put the lip sync on this shot of TNR, is I've often found it to be the case that if I usually find that if I do my blocking in a scene on paper, I don't usually do that. But when I have, either with a background painting or with a shot that I was going to do, what's happened multiple times is sometimes I'll reference what I sketched in on paper. What's happened more often is I won't, but I'll remember what I did, and I'll do it digitally. And it's really freaked me out a few times how just because I had done it on paper, I do the shot, and then a month later I look at the show, and I might be flipping through my journals or whatever, and I see what I did on paper, and I'm like freaking out about how really close to what was done on paper was what got into the show, even though there was a disconnect between when I did it. So there's definitely something about blocking in your work, and then coming back to it, or it could be blocking in your work on paper. I'm not sure which it is. It's probably a little bit of both. But with that in mind, we were in town today while Valerie took care of some things, and so I blocked in the next sequence of the show on paper. And so I was going to actually pull up the drawings here just so you guys understand what the heck I'm talking about. So bear with me for half a second. I went ahead and saved them in the extras folder. And so I'm scanning through to find on my other screen. I guess I can pull this down here. I'm just scanning through to find. Here they are, right here. So this was the first one. And what you have is you're cutting after this TNR shot. You're cutting to a close up of Luca. And so for those who wonder what my on paper planning looks like, it's not properly a storyboard, although the next page pretty much is. But this is commonly how I would do it. So I sketch in Luca, so I say, well, okay, I'm going to want kind of these few expressions, and then he's going to turn his head, because when TNR is saying her line that I'm going to put the lip sync on here, at the end of the shot you hear, you hear something like that, so you hear monkey in the background. And then Luca responds with, hey, monkey. And then here's what happens. So this is shot number one, and then it cuts down here to shot number two. Shot number two, it's probably hard to see, and I'll show it on the... actually, let me do this. You guys can see that this is a bit of a mess, but it makes sense to me because I drew all the poses and the framing, and then I go through it, and I'm going, okay, this is going to be shot one. Okay, this is shot two. Shot three cuts to a close-up here of Luca turning around, and he's looking up. And then shot four is actually back to this wide shot, and the camera's going to pan up to the top of this hill situation right here. I guess I can do it this way. Okay, so this would be shot three is Luca turning around to look up, but then it cuts to wide here so that we see monkey, and then we're going to zoom into monkey, and then we're going to see this shot where monkey's kind of going, he's kind of going like this, and he grabs his own tail and holds it like a spear with his other hand behind his head, so he's acting like he's basically communicating to Luca that he can see the soldiers off in the distance marching toward Gripson, okay, which is where they have to go. All right, so I know that looks a little confusing, but so then the second shot, or second part of the sequence, I did really more as a proper storyboard. So I guess I don't really need to show it in the timeline. So Luca turns back to these guys and says we can, there's soldiers marching towards Gripson, and then monkey pops into the shot. And Mel's like, you got all that from a few chirps? Impressive. Okay, I made a note to myself to move each dialogue halfway back to the prior shot to reduce the amount of lip sync I have to do, and also to sew the shots together. So what that means is when we see him saying there's soldiers marching towards Gripson, we start to already hear Mel saying, wait, you got all that? And then it cuts to Mel so that we can do less lip sync, and again, it just kind of makes everything edit together nicely. Okay, so then she says maybe going to Gripson's not the greatest idea, and Luca's like, well, but we need food and supplies, and the woods are way too thick. Vespar's no dummy; he knows the path you'd be taking. So I don't think this is the way it's going to be when I put it in the show, but I just put so I remembered the idea. If we want any chance of finding a boat, they all say grips and it is, and then we cut to this wide shot of the cave that they're sleeping in tonight. That the camera's then pulling out, it fades to black, and then that's the end of the sequence. Make sense? So when I cut it into the Vegas timeline, it actually plays like this. So we see him come out, he looks up, it pans up to Monkey, we cut close to Monkey, we see him kind of acting like a soldier, and then there's a reversal there that's a little confusing, and then it just kind of goes through each of these shots. Each one takes about 3-4 seconds, I suppose. Okay, so that gets us up to, and that's panning out too fast, but it gives you the idea. So let me jump over here. So you can see, actually, it's kind of surprising, but I am already, once I finish the current sequence, I'm going to be 3.5 minutes into episode 3, which is really kind of amazing. I'm already past the 3-minute point. Here I'm at 3:07, and then we'll see how this whole sequence times out, because it'll probably be it'll be a little different than what's currently in the timeline, as a storyboard. Okay, so then the order of the day today here is to get the lip sync on Tianara. Okay, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to actually jump back and reference what I did here in Tahoma. So I don't need to be in the rendered mode. I just need to see okay, she says, so I think she says she says, "You're not very bright, are you?" Okay, not an original line. I don't know where I've heard it, but I know I've heard it somewhere. But it's kind of appropriate to the situation. So it looks to me like we need an here and on frame 21. Okay, so let's go here and let's take half a second and label our layers more intelligently. This is obviously garbage. This is an effect, so it can be turned off for now. So this whole scene is way flatter than normal, fewer layers, and that's because the imagery was created in Tahoma initially, and then I just cut and pasted it over here. Now, I can already see an error that's a bit of an artifact from the Tahoma experience. Again, not picking on Tahoma here, just saying. And that is that there's a little bit of a color artifact there. Looks like that's the only one that has it. So, all right, so I'm going to switch my brushes back, and okay, so now what we need is a mouth layer. M-O-U-T-H, and we can just make it black because we're going to adjust the color after the fact. So let's go ahead and Control Insert. Okay. Fill that. Whoops. Okay, and so with the mouth, typically, if the can't always do it this way, but in this case, I think we're okay to just make it semi-transparent. Okay, and then save our work. So she says, starting on frame 31, she says, "You're not very bright, are you?" Actually, she says, "You're not very bright, are you?" And then this is actually split into two shots. So this is her saying, we probably should get some sleep. And then when she says that, you hear monkey in the background. So, um, so frame 31, and we are doing conventional anime type lip sync. So what I'm going to do is hit insert here, hit the G key, make sure we are in raw mode. And all right, a little bit of a cleanup there. Okay. So now we can take those two and duplicate them. And then we want one that's going to be like smaller. Stop everything. Why is the mouth layer? That's weird. Why is it seeing it as being this massive? I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but it's a bit strange. I guess I'll just make a selection. Okay. So I've mentioned this before, but the typical anime, there are more than one patterns for lip sync in anime, but a common one is open mouth, more open, open, more open, almost closed. And then when that runs in sequence, you can basically put that under almost any dialogue and it's going to look right. Okay. So here we went up to 3, 4, 3, 4, 5. That's right. 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it goes back to the closed mouth. So what we need is 2 cycles of this. Boom. And then, honestly, this could just be that mouth right there. I don't use clones, by the way. It's just more hassle than it's worth. You know, you could clone these, but the thing is, you can't group clone them. At least as far as I know. If you grab all these, you can't, and you go clone keyframes, I don't believe it clones the batch, but we can find out. So if we go paste keyframes, well, maybe it does. The only way we can tell is to go ahead and put a little mark on each of these, because I might be wrong here, guys. I might be steering you wrong. Okay, if this works, okay, I was wrong. Excellent. Okay, so I was wrong. You can clone in a batch. I did not realize that. That's useful, especially because here, if you think about it, if you're really gonna, you know, leverage your work, what you do is you just clone these two, and then you'd have this, and you'd only have this, this, and this be the individual keyframes, and everything else would be a clone. So something to consider if you're, you know, into that sort of thing. Personally, I really don't mind using copies. So, save my work. You're really not that bright, are you? Okay. Okay, so here we've got a little bit of a animation we need to do. This is one of Krita's little weaknesses, is you can't, this is where, like in Blender, if you want to move something, you hit the G key. Cloning is a nice tool in Tahoma. Well, I mean, in Tahoma, everything is, I mean, when you're reusing a shot, you're always essentially using a clone, because you're using an instance of it that's being exposed in the timeline. Cloning in Tahoma is different. Tom could explain that further if he wants to. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a problem in that we need to change the angle on the lip sync. So here we're on frame 59, and we've got 1, 2, 1, 2, 5, 6. Okay, so we basically have the standard. What was the frame number again? That's 59. Okay. So we're going to go to frame 59, and we're going to take this sequence right here and put it here. But obviously, they're all slightly positioned wrong. Okay. So now the smart thing for me to do, if I'm going to be, smart, is now that I've moved those, just duplicate them over top of these. And insert B key. We're in erase mode and we got the wrong color. So let me okay. So after all my yakking and actually getting down to the work of completing this shot that I ported from Tahoma, I think I'm almost done. I'm thinking I'm going to go ahead and add in some eye blinks to punch up the sort of the life of it a little bit. But clone he showed is more like exposing a single drawing in multiple places. Yes, change one, they all show the change, right? Yes. I didn't even know there was cloning in image. If I think of cloning, I'm in Tahoma. I mean, I never do it, but I think I would be thinking of cloning a level, actually. But I don't know. I don't know. You're not really very bright, are you? You probably should get some sleep. And then monkey. Then we hear monkey. So, and I always reserve the right to adjust this stuff downstream. I do feel like for this, her mouth is actually slightly too dark. There we go. So I'm going to save my work, Control R, re-render it, and basically actually strike that. I want to turn this on. There we go. All right, so save our work, Control R, and I think we're done. I'll watch it play back one time, but basically we're there. Yeah, so the other thing that, that for me is just really kind of intuitive and fast in Krita. I'm having a hard time putting into words what I'm talking about. It's the connection between your creative mind and the tool, where you can just think of an idea and boom, you just do it. There's like not a lot of housekeeping required and crazy little steps involved. That to me is the strength of Krita. Your hands are, as I say, close to the metal. Okay, I like it. Let's go back here and do the eye blinks. Let's get those in there. So, okay, problem. The TIA level or layer should be pinned to the timeline. That's for sure. Okay, right here, I would say, let's get rid of this paint layer so we're dealing accurately with the color in her character. So I'm going to go Control Insert to copy the keyframe of that drawing, and then I'm going to go back one and just hit my brush and go ahead and put in a blink. So I'm just going to, I'm punching up the lower eyelashes. Okay. And this again, this is a good example again of what I was talking about. What I'm doing right here, you can do it in Tahoma, just like sort of like just painting over something to fix it or whatever. But it's definitely a little bit on the clunky side. It's actually why, if you want to get the closest to this type of approach that you can, then get comfortable with um, the Smart Raster Paint tool, because if you use the Smart Raster Paint tool in lines and areas mode, you can, and you set the brush up correctly, you can very, very quickly just paint over stuff and you know, fix it, make changes. Um, Good example here, truthfully, would be the thing I was complaining about on the hair. Like if I was really going to stay in Tahoma and fix this, what I would probably do is I would just go like this. This is what I really want to do, is I just want to quickly smack it in there, you know, go like that. And this needs to be not selective, so it just erases everything. So I I guess this is all of which is to emphasize that clearly it's not like you can't do it, right? Now you could argue about the anti-aliasing, because when you use the Smart Raster um, paintbrush, it does not provide you with anti-alias lines. I argue that doesn't matter because um, number one, at the actual size that this will be rendered, it will look fine. And number two, what you can do to compensate for that, see that, is you go to your level settings and just add anti-aliasing. Well, okay, it looks like I added 100 already. So, surprise, surprise. That's actual rendered size right there. So, you see what I'm saying? You can't see the problem. N key. If you turn this off, let's see. Maybe you can see it up here. Nah, not really. I mean, if you're really picky, you can see the stair stepping. But, I mean, come on. So, it's not like it's a problem. But that's my advice, is if you want to have a little more flexibility with just working, with really sticking your hands in the mud and just working with it directly in Tahoma the way you can in Krita, then you probably want to get comfy with the Smart Raster Paint tool. Just saying. Okay, so save our work. Yeah. That's a good way to think of it, Tom. That's a good way to think of it. And you know, OpenTunes' pedigree is um, comes from the paradigm of assuming that the original art is all done on paper in the first place, you know, and just scanned in. So it was really the animation tools were the driver for the program. But as Darren has said repeatedly, having that liquify tool is quite useful. Okay, so I think we're done with this shot. Oh, there's Valerie. Valerie sneaking around in the background. No. No, she's just pattering around. Well, she can't patter around as softly as she used to because the the boot she's wearing on your walking cast she's wearing is she she kind of lumbers around upstairs, and it's like anyway. But her injury does seem to be getting better, which is good news. Okay, better save our work. Okay, where are we at? We've got shot number. So we've got the preview turned off. So this is what we're doing next. We've got Luca reacting to hearing Monkey in the background. So that's what's cooking. It would probably not be the dumbest thing I've ever done to pull up the Tahoma shot, because it looks to me like you got some animation of Luca's eyebrows going on. That's shot number 0314. So let's load scene. I mean, we might as well take a look. I want to be pragmatic. And I don't believe I ever brought this shot back over into Krita. So this would be, I don't do this very often. I guess for episode 3, where the heck, it would be 03, here we go. Yep, they're right here towards the top. So we want 03, 15. What did we say? It's 03, 14. Ah, yes. 03, 14 alt Tahoma version. Might as well discard the changes. Well, actually, I'm thinking out loud here, friends. Load. I guess we'll just save it. It's not, there's no harm one way or the other. Okay. Yes, this was actually originally blocked in Krita. Okay, so now this is interesting. As I'm looking at this, I'm kind of wondering why that initial move, maybe it's back here. Okay, guys, this is probably confusing. Yes. Okay, I made a mistake in describing to you what was going on. I was looking at this and saying, yeah, Luka really doesn't move that much, but I forgot. This was, what you're about to see right here is the reason why I jumped over to Tahoma for this shot. Is that move right there. Okay. So now, let me just look at this for half a second. Honestly, I think this shot could be reused. Thinking you run it in reverse. Well, no. I want to get it to there. I basically want to get that and then have him turn his head. 314. Okay. Go back here and look at what we have here. Okay, that was just the color guide from the Krita version of the shot. Yep. Let's pull up 314, the Krita version of this. Yeah. Okay, yeah, see, that's what happened was I blocked this in as a pencil test and then realized that most of all the motion could be done with the animate tool. Like you only draw stuff once. So that's why I jumped over to Tahoma. Okay, so this actually doesn't help me. I was thinking I was going to be able to steal the background, but I've got the wrong shot. So I guess it's this one we want. Let's pull up 1312. My mistake, friends. So for some of you guys, this is probably like totally tedious to watch, but you know, this is the real work, friends. This is the real work. What do we want here? We want this to be gone. We want just for my own Yes, I want this to be gone. I want Mel to be gone. I just want the background. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this as shot number 0316. So file, save as, episode 3. Okay, we've already got 16. So that's concerning. But we don't have a CRAW file. So what the heck was I doing? I just want to double check to make sure I'm not missing something here in terms of what 16 might be. There's 15, so there's no. So I must have created the folder but never got that far. So 0316, delete this. So you guys will see here in half a second what's going on. Okay, so now I'm going to cheat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the folder for that shot, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the render folder. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to render out the shot from Tahoma without the background so that we can then import the images into Krita. So scenes, I got to hit the E key. You guys can't see this, but episode 3 and okay, let me preview this. Okay, my bad. 316 does exist. Okay, so this needs to be deleted and this needs to be 17. So 0317 03-17. Again, I know you guys can't see this. This is all just creating folders and stuff. So, and then I'm going to create a render folder in there. Okay, so now what we can do is file, save as, and we're going to remedy that situation and call it 0317. Okay, I know it doesn't make sense yet, but here's what we're going to do. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the background in this shot and hit Control R, not Control Shift R. Okay. So that we can then save the images into the render folder for shot 17. Then we'll import them into Krita, which means they will automatically be locally copied into the Krita file. And so then if we overwrite them by rendering back out from Krita, it doesn't matter because we've already saved them. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to hit the save button and we're going to 317 render, and this should for our purposes be 17. Save it, and wow, that's kind of pokey. Let me drag one of these into Krita just to make sure it's got the alpha channel. Insert as a new layer. It does. Good. Perfect. Okay, cool. We don't need that in there yet. All right, so we'll let that render, and then what we're going to do is from Krita, we're going to go File, Import Animation Frames. So we're going to bring in the image sequence and then take 2 minutes to delete all the duplicates. So we're left with just the interesting images where his characterization changes a little bit, and then we use that as a starting point to block in the motion for the next shot that we're doing. So this is a bit of preliminary, but honestly at the end of the day it's going to save us a lot of time because all the pencil test and ink and paint, everything's already been done for us. You know, why are we going to redo it for no good reason? That would be stupid. So why Tahoma 2D rendering without the background to a new set of file names is so doggedly slow? I have no idea, because usually Tahoma is really pretty lickety split on rendering, at least after you've rendered the first time. The first time it's usually got to do some, what is the the dialogue that pops up, it's, I don't know. It amounts to pre-computing the images. But once it does that one time, it usually renders very quickly, no matter what you've changed, you know. So, do 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 do. Saving previewed frames, and I have to wait for it to finish so that I can import all of them into Krita. Obviously. Okay, so now in Krita we just go Control A, and we're going to import all of these images. Boop. And as you can see, they come in pretty fast. There's probably, how many of them are there? That was a pretty long shot. Okay, so now here's the clunky part, but it'll definitely save your memory footprint. What I do typically is I just start toggling through, and if there's no change, okay, and frankly, I don't care about the lip sync, right? The saving frames from preview window is quite slow. Using the output settings to render is much quicker. I don't know why. Yeah, and I didn't want to do that because I've already got the render settings baked into this scene. So I just, you know, whatever. So discard the changes, so we're just done with that. Okay, so what I was kind of starting to say but didn't actually say is that I don't care about the mouth. Okay. So if the only thing that changes is the mouth, then I'm still going to chuck it. Okay. Oh, come on. Krita, I tell you. Now we'll complain about Krita a little bit. Krita used to be spectacularly intuitive in terms of navigating the timeline with your keyboard. And so you could be here and you'd hit shift and it would select all of them in between. Suffice to say, in Krita 5, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on what you're doing. And like this, I'm hitting the right arrow, but because there's a selection, it's assuming that I want to loop it. So there are things in Krita 4, like right there, okay. I was on this frame, I hit shift, and I went forward one, and it actually selected the one behind as well. So there's some pretty awful steps backward compared to Krita 4, at least in terms of, like, this is quite horrid, actually. Quite horrid. It's as I often rant about, it's one of those things where you go, okay, there's no way that the developers ever actually tested the program before they released it. There's no way, because you'd be aghast, you know, to release the software, and the way it's behaving right now is just insane. Okay, it's, put it this way, it's so non-intuitive and it does so much jumping around doing whatever's the thing you would want it to do. It does the opposite, that it puts your brain in a bit of a frazzle where that smooth, unencumbered workflow that I was talking about begins to be actually all but impossible, which is kind of annoying. Now, there might be one way we could game it. I mean, so like right here, if I hit shift, okay, that worked. What I've noticed is if you go backwards on the timeline, it tends to actually work intuitively. Really weird. I'm going to keep that. So 48 is where I'm ending up. And we'll go from here to 48. Boom. And this, of course, this is really just clean up. So 72. Okay, so this can all go. This is all garbage. Boop. Okay. Okay, yes. This was originally done at 12 frames per second. I was definitely playing around with doing the 12 frame per second thing, and ultimately decided it was not a win. So okay, now I am going to actually just pack all of this together, because what I'm wanting to do is to just toggle through the frames and feel what I have that can be repurposed and possibly in a different order to make the current shot work. And then there is some stuff I'm going to have to do fresh and clean. That's for sure. Okay, so this is Luca. All right. Okay, I'm thinking I am going to start here. That's not what I want. So I'm going to test this from here to here. I'm going to go control, drag that there. But then when he lands, I want this. I'm going to grab those. I'm almost feeling like he goes, monkey. I actually think that's it. Yep. I'm going to get rid of all this. I don't need it. Okay. Not bad. Not bad. So let's take this, move it down here, and then let's give it that half second. You always want to give it a half second at the beginning of the frame for the shot to sort of settle in. So they hear the monkey. Dude, that looks good. So now all I got to do is turn his head. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to loop this. And let's see, I've been going for an hour and a half. Okay, so I'm going to loop this and take a short break. I'll be back in, oh, I don't know. It'll probably be 3 minutes or something. Use the little boy's room, yada, yada, yada. So let's go here. We'll turn off the webcam, turn off the microphone, and sit tight for a few minutes, and then I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. Um, let's see here. Tom had a few. Hiding all the frames on two, put them on one. Click frame by frame where the image doesn't change. I do it right. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So here, so I'm not trying to necessarily stick religiously to this storyboard. It doesn't really matter that much. Um, on my other screen, what I'm actually doing is I'm taking all that stuff I rendered out of Tahoma and just deleting it because I'm gonna re-render out of Krita. And so we've got the dialogue happening. Guess I gotta hit shift space. Okay. Did he? Yes, he had a. So I want to put a blink here and then fix his mouth. There's more than one way to do it. What I'm going to do is go grab this mouth, Control C, and then go here and go Control Shift V to just paste that over it. And so now, save our work. So now he's going to have to flip around a bit. I'm going to kill the background because the background's just going to be a distraction at this point. Okay. Make sure I got the right marker, pencil, whatever. Now I'm going to refer back to the. There's more than one way we could do this. Let me just look at this for half a second. I think what I'll do, just to give myself better bearings, is I'll go ahead and put that, give him one pose that may get deleted later. I guess I could turn the webcam back on. Okay, that might get deleted later, but I'm gonna say I want to sketch this out. So we got kind of seeing him. Boom. Okay. That would work. So, just thinking strategically here. Okay, one thing we need to do here is in the Luca layer, take these eyebrows and Control Shift V, paste them back into the same layer so the eyebrows don't change. I don't want the eyebrows to change during that blink. Okay, but what I do want to do is actually Control C and Control V, not Shift Control. Why did I do that? Because I just put his eyebrows in a separate layer. Okay, and now what we can do is just hit the G key, sample that color. Now we're probably going to have a problem here, I suspect. Let me see. Oh, I guess not. I wasn't sure if there was a bit of a gradient baked in there, but I guess there isn't. So unsolo that. And now once we get to here, the eyebrows are in a separate layer. Okay. So if we turn that off, we see we lose them here. But if we go backwards to here, there they are. So they disappear here, and it's from there that we're going to animate them. Okay. So turn that back on. Question: are we going to have a conflict back here in the browse layer? We probably should insert a keyframe right there and delete that keyframe. Otherwise, we'd have the eyebrows overlapping earlier frames where the brows are in a different place. Hey, Sifter. I shared the Setia Dreams link at the beginning of the live stream today, and also I'm actually, even as we speak, I'm scraping the site. So here, I mean, this right now, it's downloading a gigabyte RAR from one of the Setia. I don't know if I'm saying that right. You probably would know. But I think it's downloaded about 70 gig worth of RAR files. Definitely a heck of a resource. I love it. Okay, in the browse layer, what are we going to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do is solo the layer and clean it up. So let's just hit the G key in erase mode, and we want this to be raw interpolation, as you guys are well aware, and just clean this up. Yeah, I just wanted to have a local copy of the RAR files so I can roll my own gallery, because as cool as that site is, its performance is dicey. Like a lot of the time, you kind of have to sit there, even on a really good internet connection, waiting for stuff to load. So if I had them loading off my local server, that's going to be pretty lickety split. Am I right? Okay. So now, the thing I want to think about here, I'm going to actually get rid of this layer. I'm going to ignore the eyebrows for a minute. I guess we could put these guys in a group. If we put them in a group, that will allow us to use Liquify if we want on the whole kit and caboodle. I'm moving slowly here because I don't know if what I'm going to do is going to work, and there's a good chance it won't, but I'm going to try. So I'm gonna say, come on, where the heck are we here, friends? Okay, so one thing I need to do right now is make sure these layers are pinned to the timeline. That really throws me off, and I still to this day have not figured out how Krita decides which layers it's going to pin to the timeline automatically and which ones it's not. I find it a bit baffling. It seems inconsistent, but that's probably just because I haven't figured out what the algorithm is. I think that if a layer is, I think if the layer you're working on is pinned and you create a new layer, yeah, see, then it's pinned as well. So I think that's what it does. It's not like the worst approach in the world, but it is a bit confusing. So what we want to do is we want to be here because we're just going to do a little Liquify test to see if this is going to work. And as I said, it probably isn't. Okay, now that's obviously a radical change, but bear with it, because between correcting the distortion and then resetting his general translation, in other words, where he is, because he's obviously moved to the right here. Okay, so again, I know this is a little confusing, but I'm just gonna work with this. Okay, A key. We don't want liquefy now. And I probably should take note. I'm looking at the grid, so it's this square right here, this gray one is what I'm looking at. Okay, and I want to replace him back there. And then I need to be in one of the keyframed layers in order to be able to just toggle through them. Okay, so now we definitely have a problem insofar as his scaling is concerned. Okay, I don't like the way the hat shrunk, obviously. So as I said, this may not work, but I figured it's worth a try because I don't need a big change in his expression, but I do need a little one. So now what I'm doing is I'm making adjustments to the eyebrows individually. So we're going to essentially pick up the backs of his eyebrows and then move the whole thing down. See what I mean? So we're just kind of evolving to that expression. Like I said, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You know, but it doesn't make sense to redraw everything if you can tell the story effectively. You know, leveraging your work, so to say. Okay. And now, let me look at this. Okay, the only thing that's really bugging me like a lot is his hat. It palpably shrinks. So we just have to... That's not bad. One could argue that maybe this should tilt up a bit. Okay, and then the other thing I want to do, and I'll do it, so one thing I'll do if I'm playing these kind of games, what I'll often do is do them on another, like I'll do it on another keyframe, so I'm not destroying one that I know is good, and then I can always copy it back over another one if the whole action is taking place too slowly, right? So what I'm going to do here is sample that color, and then I want to just, I don't need to worry about the color yet. Of the skin. I just want to see if the expression's going to work. If the expression's going to work, then I can go ahead and do what I'm doing now, which is go in and clean it up and, you know, make it look good. Here, same situation. Okay, and then what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to skip forward one frame, hit the A key, and then this is going to be a bit of a, I'm going to do a little bit of a crazy thing, and then do a filter, blur, whoops. I guess we'll have to do it separately on the two layers, but that's okay. So let's go a directional blur, motion blur. Because what I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, this is, we're going to actually cut on this frame. So Control F. So all we need is one frame, and then on frame 26, it's going to cut to the outside of the cave. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, we might as well put the background back in and see what we've got. Monkey. See that? And then we'll literally cut it there. Okay, so this is a calculated risk in terms of how we're doing it. We're gonna say let's just chop this down to 26 frames, and let's get this rendered and put it in the show, and then we'll go find the background image that we're going to be cutting to make sure it's all going to work. Okay, so this is going to be shot number 0317. 0317. Ping 26. Got it. Perfect. Okay, so we'll let that render. And there's something else I wanted to try right now while I'm thinking about it that I thought about. I was like laying in bed last night and thought about this. So I want to try something. I was curious if you have ink lines like this done essentially with a pencil, so you're going for that scanned look. Okay, when I'm if they're a little sketchy, let's put some more sketchy lines in there to just kind of break it up a bit. Okay, my question was, I want to see how erase layers interact with the alpha. Okay, so if I want to clean up ink lines, normally what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp the alpha channel. Okay, so you can see what happens. It makes the lines thinner and darker, depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, so we'll call that a filter mask and turn it back off. So my question was, if I add a erase layer, so let's just fill this in with any color, it really doesn't matter, and put that in erase mode, and by the way, importantly, these all need to be in a group for this compositing to work. Okay, so let's turn off solo mode, and as you can see, the erase layer is causing everything to be erased because it's all filled. So my question was this, I have no idea what the answer is. If we turn the opacity of an erase layer down, does it gradually ease in the clamping out of the alpha? Because if it does, I would say no. I would say what it's doing is it's just making everything more transparent. So you can ease in the erasing, the amount of erasing, but it doesn't sort of intelligently say, okay, now I'm going to really clamp out the edges that are partially transparent and leave still pretty dark the you know, the main lines that you want to leave behind. So clearly, if you're going to clean up your ink lines with curves, I mean, you know, if you need to clamp them and darken them and clean up the mess, then you really need to use, unfortunately, a curves tool, which means you either want to bake it in by doing multi-frame, or you're going to have the performance penalty when you play back your animation if you use a filter mask. So all good. I just wanted to see what that was. And Sifter, no, I did not know that. Hopefully, oh my gosh, you know, hopefully that's going to be a real boon to Krita's development in some way. And boy, if they could get some, well, what would my wish list be? Let's just say this: stability, common sense stabilizing of existing functionality, making the existing functionality like absolutely bulletproof, and get rid of some of the stuff that is really just nonsensical design choices, like I was showing earlier in the timeline. There are things that were just amazingly intuitive in the timeline in terms of how you interact with it in Krita 4 that were just destroyed in Krita 5. It's worth it to be running Krita 5 for other reasons, because there's other things that are way more stable. But it's just, that's Krita. It's all over the map. They improve this, and they wreck this. That's just completely normal for Krita's development. A transparency mask? Okay, now I've never thought about that. I've never ever used a transparency mask ever. But I don't think I'm going to indulge that idea right now because I suspect if you're using a mask, okay, so it's being applied algorithmically on every frame as an animation plays back. My purpose here was, is there a way to tighten up fuzzy pencil lines that you want to essentially turn into ink lines without the performance penalty of a filter? Okay? Anything that has the name mask in it, so it's a special layer that's transparency mask, transform mask, whatever, you typically have the performance penalty. Whereas anything you can do with like color correction or anything else that's simply a layer that uses blend modes to get the result, typically has almost no performance penalty. So it's the difference between having to wait 3 or 4 seconds for the animation cache to reload versus not. Right now I can have 25 frames or 25 layers in a Krita scene, and if there's no masks, I can hit play and it'll play back with it won't even have to fill the animation cache. It's pretty amazing, actually. Like that, it just plays. Okay, so this is good. I like what I'm seeing here. All right, so let's go back to the show. If they could make Krita more real-time, that'd be a major deal maker. Yeah, there's a lot of things that would be kind of neat to see. Let's put it that way. Okay, so project media, we're going to go ahead and import shot number 17, which is a mere 26 frames, playing back at 8 frames per second. Smack it in there. Let's look at how it feels. Okay. Properties, we want to disable resampling. And then what I want to do now is, I don't think, yeah, episode 3 does not have the background I'm looking for. Now, it's possible that it's in the extras folder, actually. Wouldn't shock me. And it's probably towards the end. But I don't see it here. So no big deal. What we need to do, and by the way, sorry guys, I didn't switch back to screen. So I'm just looking through my image browser. Up, is that it? That's the close-up version of it. It does not look like I have it in the extras folder, which probably means when I did the shot. Oh, there it is. That's what I'm looking for, that right there. Okay, so just for editing purposes, I'm going to drag this into my show. Okay, so you guys will be able to see. This is what I'm trying to do. Okay, we just had this shot we did with Tianara. Okay, so now let's flow into the shot of Luca and just see how it feels when it cuts. Chirp, chirp. Monkey. Okay. I would say that worked, other than this transition right now is 2 frames, and it definitely needs to be just 1. That needs to be 1 frame. Okay. So this is, well, it gives us a start. What we're trying to get to is this. Okay, so let me go back to this so you guys can actually see the preview. Okay, so what we're trying to do is this crazy shape right here is this. Okay, So this is going to be blown up, obviously. I don't even know how big this image is, but it's pretty big. And if we have to paint over it to give it some detail, who cares? You know, let's do it. That'd be easy and quick. And the idea, actually, let's just jump. I'm sorry, we just jump back to Krita. Okay. This is complete, so let's just kill it. All right, and now what I'm going to do is take this image right here and drag it in. Actually, I'm not going to drag it in. I'm going to create a new file first, so we're clamped to the correct image size. And then we'll drag this into Krita, and then we'll play with it. Okay, so we're going to insert it as a new layer, which means we have made a local copy here. And according to my storyboard, we probably want something about like that. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to see Luca come out of the cave. And then when we, okay, now hold on a second here. Let's check a couple things because we can maybe save ourselves some headaches here downstream. This, okay, this is full HD. Okay. What we want to do is, let's undo this. Let's backtrack. Let's do this a different way. Let's take this image and just drag it into Krita. And then let's not only let's see, 141 is kind of close, but it's not quite as much resolution as we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scale it up a couple notches, not too much, and drag it down here. So we're still operating at broadcast HD, but we want to have enough resolution that we can zoom in to broadcast HD, because this shot now is obviously full HD. Okay, we want to be able to crop into this, but have enough room to pan up and kind of zoom in to something like this when we initially see Monkey. Seriously? You're doing that tonight? Valerie has gotten inspired and is cleaning Zuko's cage, which makes me want to smack her because she's been gimping around in this walking boot cast, and I don't want her to obviously give herself more issues. You guys get the point. Okay, so we'll take the selection tool and hit shift and select that back out. Oh wait, I'm sorry, what we wanted was alt, not shift. Okay, cool. Alright, and then we're gonna take that out. That looks pretty good. I'm just gonna say we probably want to just save this immediately as 18. So Salt and Light scenes, hit the E key for episode 3 and put it in 03-18, and we're gonna save it 03-18 as a plain old Krita document. Okay, so that's cool. Now we can go here, smack this behind here, and let's just keep this organic, friends. We're gonna hit the B key, grab the old airbrush, and we're just gonna paint this in. Then we're gonna go add a little bit of fog. It's important, by the way, that we don't we can't put the moon in the shot. The moon has to be coming from over here for reasons having to do with when we had the shots of Mel and TNR, we could see the moon in the background. So the moon is actually over here. Okay, so that might suggest if we really make our airbrush big, it might suggest a little bit of a, actually I'm going to put another layer on there. I'm going to put a layer in overlay mode. Let's just see what this does. Okay, why are we black? That's not supposed to be black. Okay, that's not horrible. That's not horrible. Is it? No, that's not horrible at all. However, both of these layers probably need to have a major blurage added to them so that, well, no, let's use a Gaussian blur. So that we don't get the banding. Okay, boom. And then Control F to repeat that filter and see that. Look how smooth that is. That looks nice. And now we can always turn this down, right? We can always dial it in any way we want. That's beautiful. That looks great. Okay, and now the resolution, because we're at full HD, we should be able to, I guess we should be able to label our freaking layers so that we're not completely stupid. Sky. Okay, and let's put those guys in a group. And the group will be called background as usual. Save our work, and then we're going to add a new layer over the top of it. Okay, so what I was going to say when I so rudely interrupted myself is that what's going to happen here is we're going to see Luca come out of the cave. Okay, and in my storyboard shot, I sort of put his arm out here like this. So he sort of steps out and his foot's up here, and this actually works out quite nicely the way I drew it in the storyboard. I didn't quite know that that was going to work out that way. But Luca comes out and Control Insert. Okay, so now what we're going to do is put this a little downstream because we got to work backwards, and we'll say, here's Luca, insert, insert. Let's turn the background off for the moment and turn the skins on so we know where we're trying to get to. So I'm taking, Ross, if you're here, I'm taking your advice, and put that there. Okay, so this should be 8 frames per second, obviously, and this should be probably a maximum of 80 frames. Okay, we turn the background back on, and we see Luca step out. Okay, so now let's reference our storyboard and see what we've got going on here. Okay, so that's the sketch. You guys can see I did a reasonably good job of emulating the sketch. And then in my storyboard, he basically turns. Okay, so let's say we give him two or three frames of pause. And we could cut to a close-up, but we really don't have to. Let's just keep going here. We've got the skins in there. Let's just see what we can do with this. Okay, so I'm going to use his hat and ears as a way to kind of see what I got here. Okay, hand. Okay, and let's hit the liquefy tool so we can actually push him up a little bit. B key. Okay, knee would be anchored, so this would essentially not change. Okay, very curved, straightening out. He's basically stretching to be able to see. That's his belt. Okay, so his eyes kind of go like this, and he turns around. And then we're going to pan up. And I think I want a little bit of a bend there. Little less of a bend there. More of a stretch there. Okay. So, okay, save our work. Usually I've noticed that when Krita seems to freeze up and not be responsive to the middle mouse button for panning, it's usually because it's actually auto-saving in the background. So not the biggest crime. Actually, that's wrong. Okay, we want to let the hand fall. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pan up. So, boom, pan, boom. So right about here, you're going to land, I would say here. It could be here, but I think for my purposes, I'm going to put him here. Okay, and then we're going to be cutting to a close-up of Monkey. So I think my sense is that probably, whoops, come on, Krita, don't be so stupid. Okay, we probably want to take that whole thing and shift it up. So, look at that. Isn't that cool? That looks good. So, Luca, you could arguably do that. Poke. Isn't that nice? That's some nice motion right there. And once we get to the panning up to see Monkey, we're going to be cutting to a close-up of Monkey, obviously. So I don't think we need a close-up of Luca here. I think we are in good shape. In fact, I am sufficiently happy with this that I am going to cut it into the show so that I can do the digital pan. And I think for our purposes, since this is the only change here, we'll just go ahead and stick Monkey a little closer. And for this shot, let's just kind of feel the timing. Boop, bump. Probably that's it. 30 frames. Okay, so let's cut this into the show, and you guys are going to see that this is actually going to look pretty cool, I think. I will be kind of amazed if it isn't. And then what we can do is in Vegas, we'll go ahead and put the camera move in. Okay. So one thing we want to do is shoot, pan up. Okay, we probably need to rest on him a little bit longer than that. So let's make this 36 frame. Okay, so Control R. I guess we'll save our work. Control R. And this should be 18, not 17, obviously. Delete 18. 03-18 period. And now we're going to smack it into the show and add in the camera move, and I think we're going to be liking what we see. Okay, so if we jump back to Vegas, this shot or this image can be removed, and this is Luca. We're not going to do the close-up. We decided to skip that. So actually all of this up to here we can delete from the timeline. Okay, so Tools, Clean Project Media, and now we're going to import the sequence that we just created. 0318, render, grab it, boom, 8 frames per second, smack it in, make sure that it is disabling resample, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go into our editing here, as it were, our cropping, and we're going to tighten that. We're going to lock this to the timeline so that we can really see what we've got. So this needs to be something like this. You can, if you wanted to be strict about it and not lose any resolution, then you'd set it, you'd manually set it to 1280, and then this would be your shot. And that feels pretty good. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to look at where Luka pops out and turns around and looks. And I would say, for our purposes, we don't want to see monkeying the shot, so we're actually going to go a little bit lower resolution. And if that means, honestly, I mean, look at what we're seeing on the screen. Okay, you know, if we need to manually paint in a little bit more detail to get away with this background image, that's fine. So for our purposes right now, the main thing is to you know, get it cropped to where it looks good, okay, from a framing standpoint. Okay, so that's looking good, and I'm going to let this play. He hops out, boom, right there. Okay, so this is where we want this keyframe to be, and then let's let it play. Well, I guess we can't actually let it play. So let's set it here. I think probably, honestly, that's probably what we want. We probably just want to do that. Okay, so let's just see how that feels. He pops out, looks up. There's monkey. That's perfect. That's perfect. Awesome. Okay. So now all we got to do is do the animation on this shot, and then we can cut to the close-up of monkey and do all his little gyrations. And I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing, honestly. You know, it's like, it looks good, you know. Okay, so coming back here to Krita, I think I've been going for over 2 hours, so I'm basically ready to call it a night. I'm gonna say let's consider a little bit of manual painting here. I'm gonna shrink that baby down to about like that, and then I'm gonna consider making the width of the shot greater than 120 next time. You want to pan sideways. Right. I mean, I cannot disagree. Obviously, working, I mean, anybody's going to say that obviously you want higher resolution. Okay. I tend to be a little bit of a know-it-all on that point more than some people, because I've learned that a lot of times when you extol the virtues of high resolution, it usually turns out that it didn't actually matter that much. But yes, having more resolution is better than having less in order to maintain both detail and the flexibility to move the shot any way you want to. But I will say I'm quite happy with what I got here. I mean, that framing I really like. I would even actually argue that maybe the initial keyframe here you could argue that would be even nicer framing. But I mean, I have to say I do like what I see. I'm not seeing any issues with that from a framing standpoint. Now, if you really wanted to punch this up, I think the key to punching it up is actually the foreground. This is where you could really make the shot shine, is by going in and really getting some more detail on these rocks in the foreground, because I like the framing with you've got about 25% of the screen that's visible at the bottom below where Luka pops out. So the framing weakness here is all of this space here, suggesting that it might be better if you could put Luka a little closer on the rule of thirds, maybe over here just a little bit. But to do that, we'd have to push in a little too far And if we don't push in a little too far, we're going to wind up by getting some of this out of here, we're going to reveal monkey too soon. Okay? So that's the tug of war, and I'm trying to find the middle ground on that. And it seems to me that punching up this rock texture in the foreground and giving it a little more quality would help with that. So, obviously a lot of this stuff is pretty splotchy. you know, it's not the most detailed you may have ever seen. So, and fortunately, I like painting backgrounds. I tend to have a good bit of fun playing with the way light makes. Well, it's the old matte painting concept. It's the idea that you're painting light and just suggesting to the eye to kind of feel like it sees what you think you see. I love the work of, for example, guys like Peter Ellen Shaw. And frankly, I think it's the unsung potential hero of modern filmmaking is for budget filmmakers to say, you know what, let's just lock the camera and use traditional matte paintings the way they did back in the 40s and 50s. Why does the camera always have to be moving? Why do we have to do 3D motion tracking and all this? It's not that it's not cool, but it's not cool anymore. It was cool when it was new, but now it's not. It's only cool to the extent that it serves the storytelling, you know, undeniably. So for me, I think, and this is kind of an interesting thing along those lines, by the way, is if I'm going to extend this up, just allowing the sky to actually bleed through is kind of an interesting thing. So, and clearly we're going to allow this to be a little more out of focus and blurry and mushy because, well, it's fading into the background. So, but I love that stuff. I love traditional matte painting. The way a guy like Ellen Shaw or Albert Whitlock would just use just the tiniest little, they'd take a just little bit of paint and put it on the glass, and it would just, you swear to God you're looking at a photo, of real stuff. The skill in that was just incredible. Not to take anything away from what people are doing today, because cool is cool. But this, what I'm doing right here, is I really enjoy doing it. Okay, I want to, as Ellen Shaw himself would say, use the big brush. Use the house painter's brush. Don't use the little dinky brush. Just find the little splash of color that just, it's like I'm squinting right now at the shot, and I'm just kind of feeling like right here, just a little dab, just a little something that makes your, because you're going to be looking here, and when you see this out of the corner of your eye, you just accept it. It's an amazing thing. And then you look close and you go like, wow, there's like nothing there. There's no detail, there's no nothing. That's right. That's what guys like Ellen Shaw and Whitlock understood very well. Now I find this to be, traditional matte painting is, for me, one of the absolute coolest things, and what a privilege to be able to just sit here and do this. I mean, I every day I just kind of marvel at. I consider myself quite lucky to. I mean, I'm not. It's not like I'm making any money from the cartoon or anything. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. We'll find out in. Well, we'll probably find out in about 6 months. But But it's still a super cool thing to be able to just create stories, you know. There is no cooler work. And it's honest work, you know. Kind of harkening back to what I was talking about the other day and about manifestation and all that pop psychology stuff, you know. The thing is, we're all we're all indulging varying levels of delusion and storytelling all the time. At least with telling stories in cartoons or movies or whatever. At least in that scenario you're telling the truth in the sense that you're not making a secret that you're just telling a story, you know? You're not trying to hide that. The whole point is to just entertain people and make them feel good, you know? That's all you're trying to do. And I think that's quite an honorable thing to do actually. Because people are very hungry for that. You know, people want to just enjoy stories. Now, doesn't that look a little better? Quite a difference, huh? That is quite a difference. That is quite a difference, friends. Okay, I'm going to quit there. It's been almost 3 hours. Well, it's been 2.5 hours. I think this is a good place to stop. And I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing and making great progress. I would say that I want to feel a little bit more of this sort of vertical motion up here. Just a little something that punches up that. Just give me some light happening, you know, light touching things and reflecting off it and whatnot. So I love it. I think that's the coolest thing. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. I hope this has been an enjoyable session for you. And with that, you're welcome, Maria. And, you know,